Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're getting into something pretty wild. It's the extreme world of Elon Musk's work habits, his whole approach to time.
Oh, yeah. It's one of those topics that, it fascinates people, but also maybe slightly terrifies them.
Totally. And we're pulling insights, drawing from discussions, like the kind you find related to channels like Top Rich Secrets, which really digs into his, well, radical
The
methods.
headlines are one thing, but what's actually going on behind the scenes? What's the why?
Exactly. So our mission here is to, try and understand the mindset, the actual methods behind that, like legendary productivity, and importantly, figure out what useful bits you might be able to take away. Even if, let's be honest, sleeping at the office isn't exactly on your agenda. Okay, let's unpack this. Maybe start with the big one, the sheer number of hours.
That's the first thing, isn't it? The 100-hour weeks, sometimes even 120, sleeping on the factory floor, basically living at work during those critical times.
Yeah, and the sources we looked at, they explain his thinking. And it's surprisingly simple. He just calls it math.
Right. It's not about bragging, supposedly. It's about, well, output. The core idea is if you work 100 hours and someone else works 40,
You get way more done.
you just get roughly 2.5 times more done in the same amount of time. Over a year, that compounds massively.
It's like using brute force almost to just shrink the timeline for these huge goals.
Yeah, sheer intensity.
And the source material, it paints these really vivid pictures, like the Tesla Model 3 ramp-up, production hell, he called it,
Oh, famously.
or the lead-up to a big SpaceX launch. These weren't just long days. It felt from the descriptions like the mission's survival was on the line. So he's there, physically present, sleeping where the problems are, just trying to cut down troubleshooting time by minutes, by hours.
But the sources also add some important context here. He's apparently quite open about how, painful and lonely that is, how exhausting.
Right, it's not presented as something amazing to do all the time.
No, not at all. He frames it more like something he felt was absolutely necessary when the companies were on the brink of failure. So the lesson isn't work 120 hours. It's maybe that for true breakthroughs, sometimes you do have to push way past what's comfortable. But there's definitely a cost.
The huge personal cost, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not a model for everyday life. But the principle,
Mm-hmm.
maybe it resonates. Like
Ooh.
for you listening, is there a goal, a project, where a short, intense burst of just outworking the problem could make a real difference, a temporary push?
Interesting question. And related to managing those hours, there's the other really astonishing part, how he structures his day.
Okay, this one always gets me. The whole scheduling in 5-minute blocks thing.
Yeah.
Like the sources say his whole day is broken down, 12 little slots per hour, hundreds a day. It's not just managing hours, it's managing minutes.
It sounds completely bonkers, right? But the sources explain the logic behind it. When you're the CEO of SpaceX, Tesla, Neuralink, XAI, you're juggling these incredibly complex, high-stakes things all at once.
There's just no time to waste.
Exactly. Zero slack. Apparently his assistants map this out weeks ahead. Everything gets slot meals, meetings, factory walks, debugging code.
And the descriptions of a typical day are just dizzying. The source material shows him like firing off emails, then instantly jumping into a car design review, then a SpaceX flight issue, then walking the factory floor to solve a production problem.
That ability to context switch instantly between completely different, highly technical domains, it's remarkable.
Wow.
But crucially, the sources also point out what this kind of hyper-scheduling is designed to avoid.
Ah, okay. What gets cut?
Time sinks. Long meetings with no clear agenda. Most emails, apparently. Small talk. Anything that isn't, quote, signal.
Signal over noise.
Obsessively. The focus is purely on time spent directly impacting the product or the mission. Everything else is just noise to be filtered out. Ruthlessly.
Okay, that level of microscheduling feels maybe a bit much for most of us, almost robotic. But the underlying idea is powerful, isn't it? Treating time like it's incredibly precious. Breaking it down makes you see where it's really going.
Prevents that busy but not productive feeling, that drift.
Yeah. So what if you listening just started small? Like what if you just blocked out one really important hour in your day and scheduled exactly what you were going to do in those 60 minutes, protecting it fiercely? Could that make a difference?
That intentionality, even for a short block, takes real discipline, which, maybe surprisingly, brings us to rest.
Right. You hear 100-hour weeks, you think the guy must never sleep. But the sources actually say he aims for about 6 hours a night, consistently.
And this is key. It's not about relaxing. It's about optimizing recovery. for work.
So rest is another system to optimize.
Pretty much. The
Right.
sources suggest he actually experimented and found that less than 6 hours just made him less effective, less sharp.
Interesting.
So sleep isn't a weakness to be overcome. It's engineered into the system as necessary for sustained high performance.
And the routine seems pretty set based on the source material. Bed around 1 a.m., up around 7 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like he avoids just, passively scrolling or zoning out late at night. Time is either for focused work or focused rest and recovery, or maybe family time, things with purpose.
Yeah, if you look at it through that optimization lens, random downtime activities could be seen as liabilities. Rest needs to be efficient, restore you for the next work block.
No multitasking during rest either.
Right. Work fully when working, rest fully when resting. Intentionality across the board.
So the takeaway for you listening isn't necessarily only sleep 6 hours. Please don't do that just because he does.
Definitely not.
But maybe it's about respecting rest as a non-negotiable part of performing well, protecting it, realizing that better recovery might actually be the secret to doing more, paradoxically.
Well put. And even with all that scheduling and deliberate rest, he's not personally doing every single little thing.
Yeah, that's another myth, right? That he
Yeah.
micromanages absolutely everything. The sources we saw suggest his focus is actually much more specific.
Yeah.
He focuses on what they call high-leverage work, meaning dedicating his own time, which is obviously the bottleneck, to the places where his input makes the biggest difference.
Okay, that makes sense.
He calls himself an engineer first.
Right.
Right. And that seems to be where a lot of his focus goes deep into engineering, product design. He delegates a ton of other stuff, admin, operations,
Mm-hmm.
but dives deep into the core tech.
So the source material gives examples like him getting really into the weeds on battery design or powertrain at Tesla.
Exactly. Or debating launch protocols at SpaceX. Or the specifics of neural engineering at Neuralink. He's involved, but strategically, in the critical areas that define the future of the product of the company.
And this apparently influences how he makes decisions, too. The sources say small stuff gets decided fast, like really fast, often irreversible.
No time to waste.
Right. But the huge bet the company decisions, those get serious deliberation, often using that first principles thinking.
Yeah, breaking things down to fundamental truths. Like the famous example of calculating the actual raw material cost of a battery pack instead of just accepting existing prices.
Exactly. Don't reason by analogy, reason from the ground up.
So for you listening, the lesson isn't just be busy. It's about having the clarity, maybe the courage, to focus only on the few things that really move the needle.
The 80-20 principle on steroids.
Totally. Could you figure out what's just urgent versus what's truly important and high leverage for you? And could you maybe cut out some of the rest?
That takes discipline. And it probably helps you if you have an incredibly strong driving force behind it all.
Which leads perfectly to the final piece, according to the sources, the fuel for all this.
What is it?
It's not just passion, it's obsession. He's quoted saying, unless you're absolutely obsessed.
Obsession. That's a strong word. How do the sources differentiate that from passion?
Passion is great, but it can fade when things get tough. Obsession, in this context, is presented as this relentless, almost involuntary force. It's the unwavering belief in the mission, Mars, sustainable energy, whatever it is, that just pulls you through incredible difficulty.
So the time management, the hours, it all becomes secondary to the mission. The mission dictates the time use.
Exactly. And the sources suggest this obsession actually simplifies things in a weird way.
How so?
Because when the mission is that clear, that all-consuming, it acts like an instant filter for every decision, every minute spent. Priorities become obvious. There's no room for procrastination because the mission itself creates this intense urgency.
Of course, the sources are also clear about the downside. That kind of all-consuming focus, it takes a huge toll personally, relationships, family life.
Absolutely. It's not presented as a universally positive thing. The level of sacrifice required for that kind of world-changing ambition is immense. It's not a path most people would or should choose.
Acknowledged.
But the underlying idea, finding something that matters so much to you that it provides that pull, that drive,
Yeah.
that feels applicable, doesn't it? Finding something you could become obsessed with, maybe in a healthier way. Something that makes managing your time feel less like a chore and more like chore. Just clearing the path for what you absolutely have to do.
Yeah. When you look at the whole picture from the sources, the intensity, the structure, the strategic rest, the focused work, the obsessive drive, it's a system. It's not just about a to-do list.
It's about squeezing the absolute maximum potential impact out of every single minute.
And like we said, the point isn't for everyone listening to suddenly start working 100 hours and scheduling toilet breaks.
Please don't.
Right. But looking at this extreme case, it forces you to ask that fundamental question Musk seems to live by.
Hmm.
Am I using my time in the most effective way possible for what I really care about?
You might not be aiming for Mars, and that's totally fine. But you can borrow the principles, right? Use intensity selectively. Add structure where you need focus. Treat rest seriously. Concentrate on your high-leverage activities. Find your why.
Because ultimately, success isn't just about talent or getting lucky breaks. A huge part of it is how you manage and direct the time you actually have. Even small shifts towards these principles can really amplify your results over time.
So, to leave you with something to think about, here's a final, pretty provocative question inspired by the source material. If you knew you only had 24 hours left to make progress on your biggest dream, how would you spend those hours?
Wow. Yeah. Thinking about that, even just as a thought experiment, it cuts through a lot of the noise, doesn't it? It makes your real priorities stand out pretty starkly. Shows you where your time should be going, maybe, versus where it is now.
Absolutely. Well, we hope this deep dive into one, let's say, unique approach to time has sparked some ideas for you. We'll definitely be back soon, exploring more fascinating mindsets and methods. But for now, maybe just ask yourself that question. Time's the ultimate currency, right? How are you investing yours?